I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Last month I opened a Google form poll for my community so that they could rank the areas of Demon Souls from easiest to hardest. We give each area a difficulty score between 1 and 10, then figure out the overall average and use that as our metric. Unlike my previous community rankings though, playlist in the description, I also asked my viewers to rank each area from personal enjoyment as well. While this video is about the difficulty of each area, I'll also be showcasing how much my audience enjoys each level. Thank you very much to all 121 voters for participating. I couldn't make these videos without you guys. Please note though that 2-3, 3-3, 4-3, and 5-3 will not be included in this ranking. They're glorified boss arenas and do not represent what I'm looking at in today's video. So let's jump right in. My community ranks the Demon Souls areas from easiest to hardest. Let me know if you agree with my community down below. At number 14, we have The Nexus, which scored a total difficulty average of 1.18 out of 10. However, The Nexus scored a healthy 6.7 out of 10 in our quality rankings, taking 5th place overall. There isn't much to say about the Nexus when it comes to the topic of difficulty. After all, it's a hub area that isn't connected to the overworld, a majority of the NPCs that you meet and bring back to the hub are friendly, and you really have to go out of your way to antagonize the people. I did include Below the Nexus as part of this entry, which I specified in the Google form, which gives the level the tiniest bit of difficulty, as you do end up facing King Allant as the true final boss fight, but if anybody died to him, they're not admitting it on camera. Dare I say, the most difficult aspect of the Nexus is just finding the Monumental after beating 1-1. That little gremlin is incredibly well hidden and not down the obvious paths, which makes it very easy for people to miss him. There are compilations of Let's Players online trying to find him, and it always brings me a little bit of joy. In reality, the Nexus is famous not for difficulty, but for the atmosphere it presents. There are many players who swear by this being their favourite hub, and I totally get it. The original PS3's Maiden in Black theme is one of the calmest tracks in the series, which makes checking in with Thomas or the other NPCs very relaxing. The colour scheme is so ethereal and muted in a way that doesn't feel threatening, a stark contrast to the rest of the game. And despite the grim meaning behind it, we all have a soft spot for the Nexus diving board where players will throw themselves from the top of the Nexus staircase so they can return to spirit form without ruining their world tendency in the Archstones. Of course, Below the Nexus is also a gorgeous location on a white, pristine beach, while birds fly in the distance as the Old One awakens from its slumber. Its design is so otherworldly, yet the natural look with all the branches that intertwine its form, while gargantuan weapons pierce its back, there's a story to be told there. We have one voter comment I want to highlight for the Nexus, because they really hit on why this is such a beloved location. The Nexus doesn't have any enemies, barring some NPC fights that you have to go out of your way to do, and the boss in the area beneath it is the easiest in the game. No brainer, it should be the easiest area. Despite that, the Nexus is a gorgeous area and a wonderful hub. Quick and easy access to all your supplies, a godsend to counter the annoying world tendency mechanic, and the area beneath it is unbelievably beautiful as it fills my heart with a yearning for more. The Old One strikes a haunting figure as a sentient tree entity with its singular perforation for a face. It is made clear that the Old One possesses some sort of relationship with the Maiden in Black with her dialogue, and it desperately makes me wish there was more to uncover there. And the final confrontation with King Allant, and hearing his final words as you kill him, left me walking away from Demon Souls with weight added to my mind as I took in its themes. It's remarkably cruel of FromSoft to make me more invested in the world of Boletaria right before it wraps up permanently. At number 13, we have the tutorial, which scored a total difficulty average of 2.01 out of 10. While on the quality rankings, the tutorial landed at number 11 with a total quality average of 5.03 out of 10. For the first tutorial in the Soulsborne series, it certainly does its job, like you guys should do your job and parry that subscribe button, K-thanks back to the video. You appear in a ruined waterway and must explore a crumbling fortress on the edges of Boletaria. The enemies here are your standard weak hollows, with the occasional tougher shielded knights appearing further in. All of the controls are taught to you through developer messages, but if it's your first time playing a game like this, I don't think the tutorial is much help. The controls, while simple to regular gamers, can be overwhelming for people just jumping in for the first time, though feeding us the buttons in bite-sized chunks is better than throwing everything at us all at once, something Elden Ring's tutorial kind of failed at. But one voter actually revealed a tidbit of info about this tutorial level that I genuinely didn't know. The tutorial is by far the easiest level to complete in Soulsborne history. The enemies might not be the easiest to kill, the level itself may not go by the quickest, but due to one little mechanic exclusive to the tutorial of Demon's Souls, it is by far the easiest level to survive. The level in Soulsborne that guarantees most players will succeed into the next level. You see, up until you face the Vanguard tutorial boss, you are completely invincible to everything. All attacks from enemies will do damage to your HP, but will not drop below 1 no matter how hard you try. There's no ledges for the player to drop off, so gravity can't kill you, and thus you cannot die in this level even if you tried. You have to get to the end, and by the time you're there, the boss is able to kill you. But even as it most likely kills you in your first playthrough, you move on to the Nexus, meaning you technically completed the tutorial level. So perhaps this is a flex from my part, but in all my times running this tutorial, I've never actually dropped to the point where I thought I would die, or perhaps I never realized I was being saved, thus my brain assumed I was just getting lucky. Either way, it's a tad embarrassing that I didn't know this, given I am primarily a Soulsborne channel. But that does explain the incredibly low difficulty ranking. Quality-wise, a 5.03 feels fine enough. The fact you can't die in the tutorial is nice, as it means you can practice parrying those tough enemies you want mid-level. However, it's no Dark Souls Undead Asylum, which manages to be a tutorial while also being a fully functioning level with subtle gameplay progression. But this tutorial does have extra loot if you can actually kill the Vanguard, and that's just neat. At number 12, we have 1-1 Gates of Boletaria, which scored a total difficulty average of 3.91 out of 10, while in the quality rankings, it's our gold medalist first place, scoring a quality average of 7.96. Gates of Boletaria is, in my opinion, one of the best first levels in a Soulsborne game and one of the best designed areas in the series. You start at the bottom of the gatehouse, where you need to climb the inner walls to reach the battlements above. This indoor area should look familiar, as it was the clear inspiration for climbing the walls in Elden Ring's Stormveil Castle. The enemies here are simple to kill, with the main dangers being the firebomb hollows that can snipe you from afar. I just love the verticality of this section. It feels really satisfying to fight through, and you never feel overwhelmed. You can also unlock a shortcut by heading down one of the main towers, which grants you the Cling Ring, a must-have for Demon's Souls players as it buffs your health in spirit form. Atop the battlement, you enter a barracks area where you can save Ostrava of Boletaria from being attacked by hollows. You can also find a merchant behind a stack of boxes who sells nice healing items, and there's a ton of extras to find both on the upper walls and in the yard below. It's a nice bit of open area design, and some of the enemy placements towards the far side of this place can be surprisingly deadly. Then the area narrows into a linear path as you set off a ball trap to kill some regular enemies, followed by a sprint across a massive bridge while a dragon blasts fire behind you, leading to the lever that unlocks the main gate and the boss fight. I always found the corridors leading back down from that lever to be the toughest part of the level. Hard-hitting regular enemies in small cramped spaces, I've had a few failed attacks here. And yet Gates of Boletaria doesn't stop there. You can run out to a dragon eyrie to collect a host of extra items from beneath the noses of the red and blue dragons. There's a mausoleum that you can unlock in the end game that pits you against old King Duran in single combat, and there's the leftmost courtyard that can only be accessed when your world tendency shifts far enough in either direction, allowing you to fight Executioner Meralda and collect some extra goodies. I do think the difficulty ranking could be a tad higher, purely because Demon's Souls' lack of checkpoints and the sheer length of 1-1 can feel a tad brutal at times, but I'm glad my voters always had a good time here. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but the Gates of Boletaria is one of the best opening areas in any Souls game. It's not too difficult and eases new players into the combat pretty well. It also includes some optional challenges like the Red Eye Knight to show you just how hard this game can be in case you feel like you've mastered the level and need your ego checked. It's also an impressively varied level, and the way it's split up into a few distinct portions makes it feel a lot bigger and more intimidating than it actually is. The atmosphere is also on point and perfectly captures the feeling of a dark and inscrutable world that has already been lost, but still manages to weakly stumble on in its undead state. This is an atmosphere that the Souls games will return to many times in the future, so having the first real level in the Souls series capture this so well is very fitting. It's such an interesting point regarding the atmosphere because it's surprisingly rare to go through an area in a Souls game where you're there in the thick of battle. Normally you end up exploring ancient ruins or decrepit civilizations, but in Boletaria, it truly is an endless cycle of violence. It's such a stark contrast to the rest of the areas in this game, and yes, as someone who likes getting my ego checked, I'm glad you mentioned the Red Eye Knight outside the mausoleum. I'm probably his favourite victim, won't lie. Alright, one more vote to comment, why not? The Gates of Boletaria is a phenomenal level. It rewards exploration with extremely good items located within, like the Cling Ring, as well as has both towers create shortcuts in a manner that is both logical and rewarding to unlock. Which is better than a lot of the future, this gated door only opens from one side shortcuts that FromSoft defaults to frequently. There is an optional difficult secret area with the two dragons who guard solid loot and act as a prelude for your future encounters with them further in Boletaria, and then Stockpile Thomas and Ostrava's questlines are started here as well, and are some of the most impactful, to me anyway, questlines in the game. The level itself ends with you looping back around to open the titular gate to fight the boss with a reasonable run back. It's this well-designed, intricate level design that FromSoft is known for, and the true start of Demon's Souls is one of the best examples of it within the whole game. No notes, great starting area, and just a great level overall. At number 11, we have 1-2, The Lord's Path, which scored a total difficulty average of 4.52 out of 10, and it didn't fare that much better in our quality rankings, landing in 9th place with a quality average of 5.43. I've always been very split on whether I enjoy 1-2, as it's a very unique concept for a FromSoft level. You start in the gatehouse, having beaten Phalanx, and upon fighting through another room filled with hoplites, you emerge outside onto a large bridge. This path leads directly to Boletaria's inner ward, and this is the only way to progress further. There are items scattered about, wagons left abandoned, and enemies patrolling the few watchtowers as you go. But the main gimmick comes from the fiery dragon that chases you throughout the area. That's right, as you progress, one of the dragons from 1-1 will fly over the bridge, breathing fire down at predetermined spots in an attempt to roast you. So the challenge becomes waiting for the right timing so that you can run to the next spot of cover without getting hit by the flames. This becomes harder after the first watchtower though, as you realize the distance to the next safe spot is a little too far. This is where we discover the underground path, however. Slip down some stairs and you can fight through the bridge's underpass. More hollows are stationed down here, but the real dangers are the dogs, which can dash and bite you from afar with rapid speed. Soulsborne dogs are a deadly breed, and these originals are no exception. But you can also find the Merchant and Ostrava down here, continuing his questline, and you can use this passage to avoid the dragon's breath. The last part of the Lord's Path is where the level loses me a tad though, as the final set of enemies before the boss fog can feel brutal as you get penned in due to the dragon breathing fire right behind you. I've died a few times here to the Blue-Eyed Knights, and it's heartbreaking, because this level isn't as fun to run back through due to the dogs. You pretty much have to deal with every enemy every time, no exceptions. At least it becomes a lovely farm for healing items once you defeat the Tower Knight. I like the level a ton in concept, but in practice I have gotten quite frustrated being forced to run back through it. It's so linear to the point where there isn't a lot of player expression in what you can do each run, which is a real shame. But hey, we have a positive voter comment to balance me out. The Long Bridge in 1-2 is one of the most underrated zones in the entire series IMO. The view of Boletaria from the bridge is simply incredible, and dripping with atmosphere, especially if you take the lower path that goes through the inside part of the bridge, and you just take in the view from the sections where the side of the bridge has fallen away. There's this strangely cozy yet gloomy vibe that is just perfect for me. Honestly, Boletaria as a whole is just a masterpiece of level design and atmosphere, best castle level FromSoft has ever made IMO. I too enjoy just taking in the scenery and looking at the vast city in the valley, likely the capital city of Boletaria, while we explore the fortress atop the mountain. It's another reminder that we're in a living, breathing world, and it's not like the Dark Souls trilogy where everything has already gone to shit. It feels like there is still a chance to rebuild if we can only banish the demons and send the old one to his eternal slumber, and I think that's very neat. At number 10, we have 2-1, The Smithing Grounds, which scored a total difficulty average of 4.55 out of 10, while landing in the middle of the pack in the quality rankings in 8th place with 5.73. The Smithing Grounds is a rare FromSoftware twist on a mining facility, where you explore the vast Stone Fang Tunnel. This level is filled with twists and traps that aim to make your life a living hell, and a host of enemies that, while not the most difficult, can prove tricky if you're not careful. The regular miner enemies have stone-hard skin, which protects them from most types of physical damage. The only way to do proper damage is with a piercing or thrusting weapon, which can chink through their natural armor. So if you don't have one of those, be prepared for tedious encounters. Then you have fat officials shooting you from afar with fireballs, often placed in either annoying to reach spots, or near fire barrels so that they can attempt to blow you up. Of course, we have dogs as well, because why not? And then later in the level, you get these dangerous fire lizards that can do significant damage if you're not careful. The tricky part here is that there are a lot of encounters in cramped corridors. There are breakable floors that toss you further back into the level, there are firing squads that you have to find alternate paths around to avoid them, and the whole zone is a massive maze that looks so similar that you'll struggle to map out your next course of action. The theming is on point, and I really love the way the atmosphere changes as you approach the boss arena. The sound cues in the PS3 version really go a long way to making you feel like something isn't right. But I can't say I particularly care for the Smithing Grounds, though I'd probably bump up the difficulty ranking a little bit myself. Voters, how about you? 2-1 The Smithing Grounds is one of my least favourite areas of the game. I think it is designed decently from a level design perspective, but I just hate how there is one damage type that is effective, and it's Pierce, my least favourite to use by far. I also find the enemies really annoying. The traps with the fire lizards feel a little unfair and nearly impossible to get out of, the dogs are very hard to deal with, and the miners are just really boring to fight. The only thing I really like about this level are the fat officials, which the remake butchered the look of, and the overall aesthetics. The Smithing Grounds does succeed when it comes to the exploration aspect, I agree there, but this user is right in that the actual combat of this level really doesn't come together. Tedious encounters, a damage type that a lot of players don't find fun to use, it adds up. That piercing weakness for the regular enemies in 2-1 is such BS, seeing as it isn't at all communicated with you and difficult to figure out. On my first playthrough, I did everything with a scimitar, and it was absolute hell to clear all the enemies out, which you needed to do, as they seemed to be following you all the way to the boss fog. This, and the way they always seem to group up, made it especially difficult for me to get through this area, and not in a fun way. I'm starting to sense a theme here. It seems like my voters really don't enjoy the thrust-piercing damage type. Personally, I wish there was more of a hint in the level that led players to this conclusion, because while it makes sense when you think about it for long enough, I can imagine a lot of first-timers just being confused as to why their weapon just doesn't work here and assuming, oh, maybe it's meant to be that difficult. But then I'm still not a fan of these miners in Elden Ring, so perhaps my inability to adapt is the real problem. At number 9, we have 2-2, The Tunnel City, which scored a total difficulty average of 5.38 out of 10. And as for the quality ranking, it's the second most hated area in the game, coming in 13th place with a score of 4.32 out of 10, and even then that is too high. Now personally, I feel the difficulty here is too low, but I have to assume that the Tunnel City landing in 9th is partly because from the Archstone, there is an immediate mine shaft that will drop you right down to the boss fog without forcing the player to go through the majority of the level. And yes, you will likely die a few times while trying to lab out the path needed to reach the bottom safely each and every time, but once you have that premium path, there's barely any reason to explore the rest of the area. The main things you miss out on are an encounter with patches, and a useful vendor who put their house right next to a nest of horrifying flying bear bugs. Everything else, well, let's just say it's not worth chasing up. Okay, maybe the exploding minecarts are kinda funny, but everything else, nah. Have you ever wanted to get lost in cramped tunnels with barely any idea in what direction you're going? Have you ever wanted to hit the item weight limit while getting lost in cramped tunnels with barely any idea in what direction you're going? Have you ever wanted to fight tanky enemies while hitting the item weight limit while getting lost in cramped tunnels with barely any idea in which direction you're going? Because that's what's waiting for you, that in a room filled with lava, but most people don't find that area because fuck that. Oh my god, the less I can say about the rock worms, the better. Their lava sprays are so irritating to deal with as it coats such a wide area, and they often come in groups which makes them really tough to fight if their cycles don't line up. I hate this area, I found it difficult to explore, and I fully endorse taking the shortcut and ignoring absolutely everything. Making Flame Lurker the lesser evil by comparison is a real feat, Demon Souls. But don't take my word for it, listen to these totally happy voters. About the difficulty of 2-2 The Tunnel City. While the level itself can be very difficult, with the exploding minecarts, the copious amounts of the bear bugs and annoying worms that pop out of the ground, as well as the tunnels filled with giant bear bugs and the long room mostly filled with lava, while all these things can create a solid challenge, the challenge is completely optional. You can completely skip the entirety of the difficulty of the Tunnel City by running to the right at the start of the level and parkour your way down, which isn't too difficult once you know the way down. Once at the bottom, you find yourself practically outside of the Flame Lurker's fog gate. My theory has been proven correct. Why rank a level as difficult when you can simply ignore the level and go straight to the boss? 2-2, I find this level the hardest simply because of its confusing nature. It is so easy to loop around to a place that you've already been, and the ginormous bugs that block the way are super annoying to deal with. On top of that, annoying enemies and janky terrain leave a level with a lot of minor annoyances that add up. The cherry on top is the Flame Lurker, definitely one of the harder bosses in the game, so this is a level you might need to run through more times than other levels. Okay, I'm sure this voter knows the Flame Lurker shortcut, but it does make me wonder, are there any Demon Souls players out there who didn't know about it on their first playthrough? Players who ran back through the entire level in order to reach the boss? For my sanity and theirs, I hope those players are just a figment of my imagination and nothing more, because oh my god, my heart would break for them. At number 8, we have 4-1, The Shrine of Storms, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.03 out of 10. We've breached the 6-point barrier, so I'd say all the areas from this point on are decently difficult and can provide experienced players with a decent challenge. Shrine of Storms also gets points in the quality ranking with a 6th place finish, a 6.62 out of 10, plus 10 votes for favourite area. The Shrine of Storms feels like a real difficulty spike in my playthroughs, because despite the actual area feeling pretty condensed, there's just so much you have to worry about. Immediately, you're greeted by rolling skeletons who can easily kill you if you either don't block in time or you fail to see them coming. There are traps within the various ruins that you have to be careful of, some of which are in tight corridors that will kill you if you don't roll in time. Same with the skeletons, actually, funnily enough. You've got flying storm rays that will, for the entire level, be firing at you with their crystal shards, which is fine when you're in the main part of the area, but the moment you're traversing the cliff sides to reach the building with the boss fog, they become your worst nightmare, especially paired with the golden skeletons who are just that extra bit stronger and deadlier than their white counterparts. And did you know you can face a rematch with the Vanguard demon? He's not as difficult here as he was in the tutorial, as you'll likely come to 4-1 after tackling some of the other areas in the game, but that doesn't change that he can kill cocky players like myself. I will never live this down. I think the toughest part about 4-1 is figuring out what the main path is, because I recall playing it for the first time and being genuinely confused about where to go initially. You have so many little paths that interconnect, but it also makes for a very rewarding level to explore, and the atmosphere both in the PS3 and PS5 editions is unmatched. I love a storm-swept ruin, I do. But do my voters? 4-1 Shrine of Storms might just be the hardest area in the game for melee builds. The skeletons that close the gap fast with damaging rolls, and stingrays you can't reach make it tough for inexperienced players at first. There are also few shortcuts compared to the other areas if you do die, and once you make it to the boss, you won't have the magic to cheese him from the top floor. We've all done it once. The area looks amazing though, with the rain setting in and the demon callback in the middle of the area. It also features the returning crow trader, so that's definitely got to earn some bonus points. Yeah, this fits my experience. As a melee build, the stingrays were the worst part of the level, and the skeletons could very easily break my stamina, though I just have to say it, do we really need to cheese the Adjudicator? He's already one of the easiest bosses in the series. Cheesing him feels so overkill, though I respect it. And yes, the Crow Trader makes their debut here in the Shrine of Storms, a staple feature of the future Dark Souls trilogy. Bring back the Crow Trader in your next game, FromSoft, I demand it! Oh, is this where we first got skeletons who wheel towards you at infuriating speeds? Thanks, Miyazaki. Really appreciate that. Nicely humbling just when I thought I had a handle on the game. What? Oh, just past them as the tutorial boss who smacked my sorry butt into the Nexus? Yeah, sure, whatever, let's fight that too. It's only after playing the later games that you truly appreciate just how slow this first game was, and dodging the quicker enemies was, for me at least, very hit and miss. Yep, we can blame Shrine of Storms for the current population of skeletons in our Soulsborne titles, and I'd argue this is one of the most difficult appearances. The ability to let them roll towards us is just criminally evil, and they weren't even bone wheels. These were normie skeletons, oh god. At number 7, we have 1-3, The Inner Ward, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.13 out of 10. While on the quality scale, it just missed out on the top 3, coming in 4th place with a 7.04. The Inner Ward, in my opinion, is a true endgame area. You can only access it after defeating your first Archdemon from one of the other 4 Archstones, but most people like to leave 1-3 and 1-4 till last, as it's the most climactic of the 5 different worlds you explore. It even has a little story as you chase a fat official through the levels so you can eventually face him in the boss arena. I love the little extra cutscene with the soldier getting crushed by the gate as you approach. It adds an extra layer to the atmosphere that shows Boletaria is a messed up place, and this Inner Ward is no exception. It's another level with tons of winding paths, a lot of ranged attackers with firebombs and crossbows galore, and a lot more Red Eye Knights to take down. I distinctly recall the stairs leading to the boss fog where you have to deal with 3 Red Eye Knights in a row. I really like how the Inner Ward first has you descending into alleyways and dealing with close quarters combat, before opening up onto a series of large rooftops. You don't get any shortcuts until you can open that gate I mentioned earlier, so you have to take every group of enemies as seriously as you can, otherwise you'll be back to the very start. I really like the path across the largest roof, which leads back down into the back road, where you can find a Strava as you open the gate, which allows you to help him take down the opponents trying to fight him. Estrava's side quest has always felt very entertaining because you take a very active role in it. You're not just talking to an NPC, you're helping him, fighting alongside him. You can also find a hidden area leading to Yuria the Witch, though you can only free her by pretending to be a fat official so that a guard will lower the path up to her, which is a really fun interaction that I wish we got more of in this series. It'd make collecting armor pieces feel more important. It's an endgame area with extremely tough enemies, but a lot of really cool moments, and in the remake is even home to the Penetrator's armor set if you go on the quest to collect the coins. Voters, what are your thoughts? I think 1-3 Inner Ward is the hardest level of the game. The stealth assassins can be easy to deal with in a 1v1 if you get the jump on them, but as soon as more than one shows up, it's very challenging. The Red Eye Knights throughout the level do a ton of damage, and they can easily kill you if you get greedy with your attacks. Those three on the staircase are probably the hardest thing in the game if you fight them head on. As I thought, enemy variety here is the true danger. I agree with the assassins, fight one and you're likely to survive, but multiple will overwhelm the player. I think it's quite lucky that most of them are fought in tight quarters. It makes it easier for you to stop them from getting behind you. 1-3 The Inner Ward stands out to me as a well-designed area that is difficult but fair. Enemies hit harder and are harder to kill, but for the most part aren't anything outside of what you've encountered prior. The real difficulty comes from the enemy placement being more densely packed and varied. Officials and knights aren't anything new, but now you have to fight them in a tight corridor or while other goons shoot crossbows at you. Two notable reprieves welcome you during this mob gauntlet in the form of the Merchant, who can restock you on consumables, and the Gate that comes at the end of the level but is a rare shortcut that many levels don't offer you. The capstone to all of this is the trio of Red Eye Knights guarding the boss fog. Such a simple encounter offers so many ways to go about it, sprinting through, drawing them out, or picking them off from range. Overwhelming them with damage, or going on a counter backstab rampage, it's all viable options. Overall, a tough level that puts emphasis on combat in a game that often prefers puzzle or gimmick fights. You hit the nail on the head, voter. In a game that prefers to focus on puzzles, facing something like the Inner Ward, which feels like this packed enemy gauntlet, is both refreshing and daunting. Difficult, but no one part feels overwhelming. I was expecting this area to land higher on the list myself, but I can see why if you come here at the end of the game, you can still slaughter your way through most of the enemies you come across. I just personally think it's harder than 1-4, as opposed to my voters who feel the opposite, but we'll get to that when we get to that. At number 6, we have 3-2 Upper Latria, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.32 out of 10, and to my surprise, was voted as your third favourite area in the game, with 7.26 on the quality scale. I'm shocked, because while I knew 3-1 was pretty popular, I didn't actually think 3-2 was particularly hype among the fanbase. I love it, so I guess I'm glad to see my voters have some taste. This is a very long level with no shortcuts to help you should you die at any point. You have to cross a vast amount of bridges to reach the various towers that support the beating heart atop the main structure. Your goal is to drop said heart, allowing you to climb upwards to reach the long staircase to the boss. And most of the enemies here are honestly pretty tame. The gargoyles, which represent the majority of the enemies in Upper Latria, are, to be blunt, very broken. Their AI can barely function at the best of times, but it does lead to some very fun interactions that give the player the edge. Then, when you lower yourself into the fetid swamp below, you meet the man centipedes, which are these creepy insectoid creatures that can easily jump you if you don't do enough damage. You can cut off their tails, which is a cool interaction, but they can still attack. I just like to attack before they do, which generally gets them staggered enough to finish off. And of course, there are a couple of mind flayers wandering about, one in the swamp and one near the boss fog, both of which can easily end your run with a single grab attack, or a couple magic shots. They're deadly. But you'll most likely be dying to gravity if anything. The enemies here aren't tough, but the terrain is. You're high up in the sky for half of the level, and once you drop the heart and more centipedes spawn on the upper paths, it just becomes even more dangerous with every step. At least just stop that ominous heart beating though. But can I stop my voters from commenting? Nah. 3-2, not the best area in the game by any means, but definitely my favourite. It's a very straightforward level that requires all of your attention, but finally gives you a quick way to man-eaters at the end. The main reason this is hard is due to the fact that if you die at all before unchaining the second tower, you have to play through the entire level all over again. This adds a level of stress the further you get into the level, even though the general difficulty isn't very hard. The fear of messing up is very much real. The mental stress of a brutal run back to your souls to reach that second chain tower is very real. If people claimed that's why this area is so difficult, I would agree. A lot of the Demon Souls areas have brutal runbacks depending on where you die, but with the elevator rides and the two very distinct elevations here, I think 3-2 might be one of the longest. At least the boss doesn't have a long run back by comparison. While I find the Mind Flayers to be some of the hardest enemies in the game, and fighting two Black Phantom Mind Flayers in close proximity is terrible for me, I love the overall vibe of 3-2. From the giant heart you have to cut down, to the ambiance of the area, whether you're in the open ramparts at the top, or the compact swamp at the bottom. It just hits all the right atmospheric notes for me. This is why Upper Latria flourished in the quality ranking. Latria itself just has an insane amount of ambience and atmosphere that feels leagues above some of FromSoft's modern areas. I truly don't believe they've been able to recreate the tone of Latria since, aside from the Hypogean Jail in Bloodborne and most recently the Abyssal Woods in Shadow of the Erdtree. But I know they've got the power to blow our minds with an even better horror-adjacent zone. Come on, FromSoftware. At number 5, we have 3-1 Prison of Hope, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.38 out of 10, and in the quality rankings it landed in second place with a 7.83, though it had the most votes for favourite area. The only reason Prison of Hope didn't take the top spot was because it has a couple more haters than Gates of Boletaria, but by god it was close. Prison of Hope is my favourite area in Demon Souls, and I genuinely do feel it's a difficult area on your first visit. If you come underprepared, you won't be able to kill the Mind Flayers in time, the guards patrolling the prison, leading to a lot of magic damage and their brutal grab. The regular prisoners aren't much of a threat by comparison, most of them just following you around. You're in more danger from the environment. There are torture traps that can poison you when opened. There are gaps in the floor you can fall through if you're not careful. There's a giant bridge outside the prison featuring a massive crossbow ballista that demolishes any who attempts to step across. And if you wander into the lowest floor, you're greeted by a horrifying mass known as the Prisoner Horde, which has killed me a few times because I always underestimate it on my approach. The challenge here is in finding your way through the map. You go up a lot of floors, down a lot of floors, and so many different keys have to be found to even have a chance at breaking out of prison. And if you eventually make it to the church, you have to face a Black Phantom on the stairway up, and a constantly respawning boss unless you kill a specific hollow in the gantry. And as for quality, there is no better level that exemplifies FromSoft's ability to create atmosphere. The ringing of the Mind Flayer bells, the song of the maiden locked in a cell, the cries of Lord Rydel's soul as he wishes to be freed, the blood dripping on the floor, coating the walls, the torture chambers, it all culminates in a magical sensation that transports you directly to Latria, horror at its finest. Not everyone's a fan though. The Mind Flayers are very much hit or miss as an enemy type. I think they work fine, but some of the voters definitely voted the opposite way, and that's almost certainly the reason why. 3-1 Prison of Hope is a difficult area to get through on a first-time playthrough, primarily due to its confusing vertical layout, filled with several locked gates and jail cells. The game goes full Resident Evil 1 style, and tasks the player with finding keys to progressively open up the level, dealing with the threatening octopus head wardens as you go. It's a cool departure from the other areas, while giving players a unique challenge. Quality-wise, 3-1 Prison of Hope has an eerie, crushing atmosphere that I adore this area, and Demon Souls as a whole, for. Areas like the prison evoke an eerie feeling that's only rivaled by Bloodborne in the series. From the dark sky looming over to the cries of some NPCs echoing the halls, this area embraces a nightmarish mood that players will remember long after they beat the game. It's a huge shame then that the remake diminishes the atmosphere in this and other areas in the game. Changes like replacing the noblewoman seller's original low drawn-out song with a more peaceful-sounding song hurts the area's oppressive nature and needlessly messes with a detail that worked beautifully in the original. Yeah, I knew we'd get a little jab at the remake here. As I've said on this channel, my experience from Demon's Souls comes from the PS3 edition, which was the FromSoft developed experience that I really enjoyed. It felt like replaying Dark Souls because the visual styles were so similar, and the remake, yes, it's the same game because they didn't change the AI at all for any of the enemies or bosses, but I do agree that from what I've seen, it does drop the ball a tad with certain creative liberties. I'm glad it exists and people can play the game, it looks gorgeous, but it's also very surface level in its changes, and 3-1's atmosphere getting changed, plus the boss redesign for the Fool's Idol that I've gone over in the past, really don't do it for me and others. Oh my god, do I love this area. I know the enemies are a bit annoying, don't get me wrong, however the incredible restraint and enemy placement, unlike the hellhole that is Depraved Chasm, that place is terrible, makes it feel more like some sort of Metal Gear Solid stealth game as you slink through a haunted prison, finding keys to open the secret exit and fight some final big boss. It reminds me a lot of Outlast, which is a game I adore. It highlights the amazing parts of Demon's Souls, being the super creative levels and beautiful art direction. I genuinely don't think there's an area in any FromSoft game that gets me more enthralled and immersed than the Prison of Hope. Though I will say that having to run for like 4 minutes and press one button just to prevent the boss from respawning infinitely is pretty annoying, even if the lore implications are pretty cool. I did not have an Outlast comparison on my bingo card today, but here we are. I certainly agree with your takes. It is like a stealth level, as you sneak around collecting keys, avoiding the horrors in tight hallways, and ascending deeper and deeper into the complex. Though I also think the critique about that runback is also pretty fair. Prison of Hope could have done with one shortcut to cut down on travel time, but that's the only knock I have on an otherwise fantastic area. At number 4, we have 1-4, The King's Tower, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.55 out of 10, while on the quality ranking it lands in 7th place with a 5.82. Not gonna lie, I'm a little surprised to see this area so high, and I'm genuinely a tad baffled as to what constitutes this ranking. Maybe it's the 3 red phantoms you face at the start, each representing the human form of the 3 demons you've faced in Boletaria up to this point? Possibly. I do think that trio is like the predecessor to the modern day gank squad, and I certainly had my work cut out for dealing with them, Ulan the Archer being the one I think I found the most annoying. But no, I think the main reason this area lands here is because of the blue dragon right before the boss elevator. Just timing the runs to get across the battlements is already tricky enough, and I died a couple times here. Then that run up to the final area was brutal. My timing's always been a bit messy here, leading to a lot of past deaths where I simply couldn't outrun the dragon's flames. But with the remake adding a shortcut here to skip the battlements, I could see this being much easier on PS5. If you want to kill the dragon, you have to head inside and snipe it with arrows or magic until it goes down. Boring, but not difficult. And I personally don't take into account the boss fights when ranking the areas, so Old King Allant isn't even in the ballpark for me. I'd need my voters to explain this one because I'm kinda lost here, and the only voter comment I could find wasn't that positive. Let's dive in. King's Tower, easily the worst area in the game and the second hardest by far. The issue is that it just kinda shoves terrible placements in your face for no reason. It starts out pretty concerning with the triple gank of death. They aren't too awful to deal with, but they are still questionable as to why they included them. At least they despawn after they die. The rest of the level is when things get very questionable. You go up this small tower with a few red-eye knights and an assassin. I've nothing to say about this, it feels like complete filler. No, the reason I wanted to talk about this was the obnoxiously awful blue dragon. In the OG game, which I'm ranking it off, it's impossible to tell what its hitboxes are, and if you get hit once, you're as good as dead. Now consider the fact you have to do this twice. And then there's Bior's quest, which the only way to end is to kill the blue dragon, and the only way to do this is by getting in a specific area before Allant's arena and spamming magic at him. This takes forever and requires no strategy. Finally, Alant's lead up is awful. Alant himself is a terribly janky boss that I personally despise, which is besides the point. So every time I die, having to slog through both the dragon of unfair hitboxes and then the really long 25-second elevator ride, not fun. Okay, so it's pretty much what I thought then. The triple gank is a tough difficulty spike, but I feel it's earned personally. It's the final level of the game, they have lore significance, I think it's pretty neat. The dragon though, yeah, you know I'm not a fan. I think it's not as well programmed here as the red dragon in 1-2, and I'm just not the biggest enjoyer of the dragon's flames being an environmental hazard trope. And the fact it can't be killed in a normal fashion is actually frustrating. But with all of this, I have to keep in mind 1-4 is so much quicker than other levels that I don't feel even with these issues it's as hard as a 4-2 or a 5-2 or even a 1-3 for example. I think this is a moment where I just swerve in a different direction than my audience, but hey, that's the fun part about these videos, because I totally understand why someone would be frustrated here even if I don't relate myself. At number 3, we have 5-1, The Depraved Chasm, which scored a total difficulty average of 6.76 out of 10, and to nobody's surprise, it lands near the bottom of the quality rankings with a 12th place finish, and a score of 4.44. I'm sad about that personally, as I'm actually a big fan of this area, but to each their own. Depraved Chasm is the first incarnation of Miyazaki's love for poison swamps and wooden structures hanging over the void. 5-1 sees you exploring these various wooden huts and paths on your journey deeper into the swamp, and for many this is incredibly tedious and frustrating. The path forwards isn't always clear, it's very easy to die from gravity here due to the various bottomless pits, many of the enemies can inflict poison, and fighting the later greater depraved ones on thin platforms is terrifying, I won't sugarcoat any of that. In fact, I fully respect people who hate the Depraved Chasm. But for me, the challenge this area presented, and the way it got me to tackle it in a very slow and cautious manner, was actually a really fun change of pace. There's something about the color palette and the ambiance that I might prefer more than Blighttown. I like the small story with the shop vendor here and her jealousy of Maiden Estrella. I like the verticality of the level and how some items can be tricky to collect. And compared to other levels, the boss run back isn't that terrible. You have to watch your step, but the Depraved Chasm isn't a particularly long area, it's just very, very dense. However, it's time for me to accept that my voters are going to be brutal. Don't hurt my baby too bad, please. Are we factoring in New Game Plus runs for this difficulty ranking? Because that completely changed my opinion on the Valley of Defilement. For whatever reason, they just decided to increase the damage of even the basic enemies tenfold in New Game Plus 1, just because they thought it'd be funny, I guess. You thought 5-1 and 5-2 were difficult before? Oh boy. Wait until you go through them again in fear of getting one shot by every depraved one with their stupid charge attack that they do, and can do at any time with almost no warning. And there are a lot of them. No joke, I had to use a 100% physical block shield and let every regular enemy bounce off of it before I felt I could safely attack without them using the charge attack, and decimating my health bar like it was nothing. I can't say I've ever dabbled in Demon's Souls New Game Plus. Honestly, for some reason I'm just not that into New Game Plus playthroughs of these games, but if that's your metric, that's entirely fair. I'm a believer that everyone should vote how they feel from their experiences with the game, and that's your experience. I imagine playing an aggressive character on New Game Plus would be quite hellish then, since aggression often means a lack of guarding, and if what you say is true, which it likely is, I know a lot of people who would struggle with 5-1 New Game Plus. Most people would choose 5-2 because of the swamp, but it's quite easy to run to the Colossus and ignore the poison with all the regen items, and even roll with the Sodden Ring in the remake. Instead, I think 5-1 has far more dangers in it. Almost every step you feel you can fall to your death, all the rubble makes it easy to miss enemies that will later hit you in the back, not to mention that one part with the plague enemies being impossible to hit, and the fact that making one wrong turn makes you lost in that maze. To top it all off, you must pass through that bridge to get to the boss, trying to survive the giant dudes with barely any space. Definitively the hardest area of the game, no matter when you go through it. That final giant depraved one before the boss definitely is infamous, isn't he? I struggled with him quite a bit, to the point where I genuinely considered raging on my first playthrough, but leading him back into one of the buildings really helped my fight considerably. And I fully agree with you, I think 5-1 is harder than 5-2, because 5-2 gives you a massive swamp and not as many enemies to chase you around it. But because people like to dodge roll, 5-2 gave them more trauma, so I'm happy to see someone on my side for a change. 5-1. 5-1. At number 2, we have 5-2, The Swamp of Sorrow, which scored a total difficulty average of 7.34 out of 10. And to literally nobody's surprise, it is the most hated area in the game. 14th place, 42 votes for least favourite, with a quality average of 3.63. What can I say that hasn't already been said over the years? The Swamp of Sorrow is the first of Miyazaki's poison swamps that he forced upon us, and it's by far one of the largest. My main critique I've always had about this level is that it's just so vast that there's too much empty space in the muck, not enough to actually see and collect in the swamp itself, which begs the question, why make it so large? I love the ambience, however, seeing the depraved town across the waters as you enter 5-2, knowing that's your destination is really cool, and I like how you have to travel around the whole swamp to even set foot in the town. The problem here though comes from two aspects: slow swamp movement and no rolling unless you wear the Sodden Ring in the remake. So you can only walk forwards and backwards, and if you try to roll, you get stuck in a lengthy animation. But I don't think the enemy placement is that bad for this handicap. Depraved ones are often placed on islands where you can roll, and the poison jelly enemies are practically harmless. The closest I've come to dying in the swamp is either from a giant depraved one because they just hit hard, or the phosphorescent slugs that guard the game's Moonlight Greatsword drop. I'd say the town is also a bit of a nightmare, as it's very easy for the poison shamans to accidentally poison the shopkeeper at the start of town, leading to us no longer having her as a vendor, and fighting through the whole town to unlock the shortcut back to the Archstone was pretty insane. We could have had a door midway through the swamp wall instead, but hey ho, this was over 15 years ago that this area was designed. I'm not saying the Swamp of Sorrow is the best area in the game, or even that it's a good area. I just don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be, but I also see that playstyle goes a long way towards liking or disliking a swamp like this, and my playstyle has always worked with the slow pace of 5-2. You also get the cat ring here, which... this is peak, you cannot convince me otherwise. Though voters, it is time for you to attempt to convince me of your thoughts on the swamp. The Demon's Souls remake was my first Souls game, and now having beaten the other games in the FromSoftware catalogue, this level isn't nearly as frustrating as it was on my initial playthrough. The Poison Lake is just a gloomier, slower precursor to the Lake of Rot in Elden Ring, and where I imagine Miyazaki meditates every morning. The town area is just a mini Blight town without the focus on verticality. The shortcut still makes no sense, and this level would probably benefit the most from relocating it closer to the boss fog. I hate the mosquitoes, but they are mosquitoes, so I get it, they're supposed to suck, but and dying to gravity in a poison swamp sucks even more. The town ganks and the giant depraved one ganks slow down an already painfully slow level, making sprinting through the level nearly impossible without prior knowledge or sheer luck. Still, I think this level isn't as bad or as difficult as most make it out to be. The combat with depraved ones can be fun if taken at an appropriate pace. Having the first Meat Cleaver swamp invasion is also so iconic. Maybe compared to the rest of the game it feels the most vacant, and I still won't come here until the mid-late game, especially since the poison can be a strain on your grass, but I don't dread it as much as I did 5 years ago. The natural evolution of a Souls player, I guess, except on pure black world tendency, cause fuck those red giant depraved ones. Valid critiques all around. I do have to point out that if people are sprinting through the level without prior knowledge, then they're sprinting through the level on a first playthrough, and that just shouldn't be how anyone plays these exploration-focused Souls games. That's a nitpick of mine, I suppose. but I appreciate having someone who agrees with me in regards to the combat and the pacing. It's not perfect, but people talk like Swamp of Sorrow blew up their house, and it's more like they accidentally lit a baking sheet on fire instead. Can't say I really messed around with black tendency here, but Red Phantom Giant Depraved Ones might just convince me to switch sides, I won't lie. At number 1, we have 4-2, The Ritual Path, which scored a difficulty average of 7.96 out of 10, 50 votes for hardest area, and a solid 10th place in the quality rankings with a 5.04. I once went on record stating that 4-2 was the worst boss run back in Demon Souls, and for Demon Souls, you're basically judging an entire level for almost all of the runbacks, so I was basically saying that 4-2 was the hardest level in Demon Souls, and would you look at that, everybody agrees with me. The Ritual Path is a long and winding route down to the old hero, but at least we start with a simple beginning. The Reaper room is easy to deal with, the Reaper can be killed by dropping onto him, and none of the enemies he summons are particularly difficult. Then you step outside, and you're faced with 3 regular skeletons and 2 golden skeletons, and oh no, don't make me do this again. The amount of times I have died to these 5 enemies likely exceeds the amount of times I've died in any other part of Demon Souls. The rest of the level to me doesn't matter. This is the hardest stretch. That is unless you're in Black World Tendency, in which case when you head out of the shrine and onto the second cliffside path later on, there will be 2 more Red Phantom Gold Skeletons and a dual katana wielding Red Phantom Skeleton waiting for you. And the pathway there is so much more narrow, what the fuck? All the while, storm rays are firing crystals at you from afar, and it just stops being fun for me. It's the one area we all struggle with, which is ironic because it has one of the easier bosses at the end should you make it there. I do like the room with the sticky white stuff though, and the explosive orbs. It's a fun change of pace, I just despise that gauntlet of skeletons. Voters, what say you? Fuck the entire Island's Edge, but especially fuck the Ritual Path. I don't think I have ever been so upset and frustrated with a Souls level than I was when running through this one. Insanely obnoxious enemies? Check. 90% extremely tight corridors, so you outmaneuvering the swarms of enemies is exceedingly obnoxious? Check. No shortcuts? Triple fucking check. All of these factors come together to create the worst of FromSoft's level design to create what is easily the hardest level in the game. Speak your truth, my friend, which is so heartbreaking because I love the aesthetic and the ambiance of the Ritual Path. It has so much going for it, but then the actual gameplay is a mess of tough enemies and awkward fighting spots. And that's crazy because 4-1 was so much fun, even with the storm rays being assholes every few minutes. Ritual Path is just a misunderstood little guy. The ambiance is excellent, and enemies are sparsely placed, so it's rare that the lack of shortcuts is ever a problem. Okay, I'm willing to accept the second half of the level is much easier than the first half, I said it above, but you can't say the enemies are sparsely placed and then leave out the 5 skeleton gauntlet plus storm rays, that's just not true. And in Black World Tendency, they fill in the extra empty area towards the end of the level to really test you. Though technically you can reset your world tendency by killing the primeval demon near the start of the level, I just didn't know that on my first unrecorded playthrough. I don't know, I fully respect the attempt to defend the Ritual Path though, voter. Every area has its white knights and you deserve to represent 4-2. This may be a personal grievance, but 4-2 caused me so much trauma on my first playthrough of Demon Souls that I've held a grudge against it ever since. Naturally, I didn't know about World Tendency on my first playthrough, and going through 4-2 10+ times on Pure Black is a fate worse than a fate worse than death. There were enough skeletons already, Miyazaki, what kind of sadistic motherfucker are you? Never again. We really need to start a 4-2 Black World Tendency therapy session in the comments. Voters, you need it. I can sense we can get through this trauma if we just band together. Ritual Path, congratulations, you are the hardest area in Demon Souls. Wear that badge of honor with pride, I guess? And that's the list. Do you agree with my community ranking? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all my future videos. The next community ranking will be on the Bloodborne areas. The Google form for that will be out sometime in the first 2 weeks of May, so keep track of my community tab for more information. I want to give a quick shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, thank you so much. It's $4.99, it gets you early access to future videos, and it gets you a shout out in the description and at the end of videos as well, plus some extra special private Let's Plays. It's a lovely place to be. Thank you everyone for watching, I'll see you next time. Adios.